Ég kannski byrja bara að ræða aðeins þessa ráðstefnu sem að nú hefst. Að það orðið langþráð að fá að heyra í þessum fyrirlesurum sem að við sömdum við í vor við nefndin sem að var sett saman til þess að vinna að svona framgangi barnamenningar í söfnum út frá samvinnuverkefni Listasafns Íslands og Þjóðminjasafnsins. Og þetta eins og þeir sem hafi fylgst með frá byrjun, þriðja dagsetningin sem að tengist þessum fyrirlesturum. Og nú bara ekki eftir neina að bíða, við bara skellum okkur á netið og fáum að heyra í fyrirlesurunum núna með viku millibili. Núna í dag talar Heidi Viktorsson og svo eftir viku þá heyrum við í Jóntinines og við ætlum að hafa á miðvikudaginn svona bara pallborðsumræður án þeirra þar sem við sem vinnum hér í barnamenningu og söfnum á Íslandi getum svona bara rætt fram og tilbaka þetta málefni og það verður líka á Teams allt saman. En ég ætla að segja ykkur að þetta sem sagt format sem heitir live event og þá erum við bara nokkur sem getum verið í mynd og þið sem að eruð að hlusta við tölvurnar ykkar endilega samt takið þátt með því að spyrja Heidi spurninga eftir á og það gerir þið í gegnum svona spjallglugga sem merktur Q&A skilst mér. Og þar bara skrifið þið spurningar á íslensku eða ensku og ég mun síðan bera þær upp við Heidi og þannig fara sérst umræðnar fram eftir á. En ég ætla þá bara að kynna Heidi. Heidi Viktorsson works at the Åland Maritime Museum in the position of interpretation and learning at the museum. And she is going to tell us everything about how they made the museum a kid-friendly place. How did they do it? Heidi, please take over.
Yeah, okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me for the National Museum of Iceland. I'm very honored to be here and on Åland now, not in Reykjavik as the plan was from the beginning, but I'm going to present to you how we at our museum did when we became what I call a kid-friendly museum and how we did that journey. And during my whole career here at the museum, the work with children and museum education has been a affair of my heart all the time. So that's something that I'm really interested in and like working with. But first of all, I would like to tell you a few words where I come from, where I am right now, where this Åland island is. Okay. Oh. Just a moment. Here you see a map, and you can see that Åland is a very tiny island situated between Finland and Sweden, but we are a part of Finland. But geographically and culturally, you can see that we actually are closer to Sweden, and the native language here on Åland is Swedish as well. But Åland is an autonomous region, so we have our own flag and our own parliament and some of the laws we even get to make our own. Here lives about 29,000 people, and we have one town called Mariehamn where about 11,000 people live. And that's also where our museum is situated, in the town of Mariehamn. Yes. So then a few words about an introduction to our museum as well. So we are a local museum that raises the awareness of the sea's impact on the Åland society. So as Åland is this island and has been surrounded by the sea through always, the sea has of course affected the society here, and the maritime life has been very big during the decades, and a natural part of the life here. And our museum tells about the shipping industry of the islands that started in about 18th century and still is a strong industry here. Our collection then, it consists of artifacts from the island's rich maritime heritage. And the museum opened in 1954, but then in 2012 development and rebuilding of the museum was done, and that was also when the approach of becoming a museum also for children and families started. So that was something that the project group actively invested in making the museum more popular and more relevant to children and families. And that is something that has actually affected everything that the museum staff undertakes, from marketing and to planning exhibitions, and the work that the front of house does when it welcomes the visitors. And when we reopened in 2012, we also got a new exhibition space. Here you see some pictures from, now it's just a moment. It's too quick. Now, sorry. There we have the right slide. You see some pictures from the museum. So we also got a new gallery, and the whole exhibition was remade, and we got a new library and this auditorium where I'm standing at the moment, and so on. So it was a really big investment. And in 2016, the museum was also elected Museum of the Year in Finland. And the next year, in 2017, we also got the Save the Children award for our inclusive educational work. So that was also really something that we valued a lot. Okay, then let's see. As a part of our museum is also this big sailing ship, Pommern. As you can see here on the picture, it's a 4-masted bark, and when you buy your ticket to the museum, you also get an entrance to this museum ship. And Pommern is open only May to September, so we have just closed for the season. And the visitor experience on Pommern was also redeveloped recently and opened to the public in May last year. And when we did that redevelopment, we also, of course, invested a lot in children and families, and they are always part of our mindset when we do new things. Next slide is just some facts, short facts about this ship. As you can see, it's over 100 years old, and it sailed all the way to Australia from Åland on the grain trade. So it has really been all around the world and sailed until 1939. It also became a museum ship already in the 1950s. So it has been here a long time. On the next slide, you see a picture of our staff. We are a quite small staff. There's only 11 of us here on this picture. We are not even that many. And 3 of these 11 are handymans working on the ship. So we don't have that much resources when we do things, but still we have managed to I think achieve a lot. And here on this picture we are celebrating our last year's visitor numbers, because they increased so much. They have been increasing since we reopened in 2012. But when we reopened Pommern last year, we had this new record, which we are celebrating here. Of course, this year has then been totally different, but the summer was okay. But we are very dependent on tourists from Sweden as well, and the border has been closed to Finland all since the spring. So that has affected the society here and the tourism here on Åland a lot. But the museum is a private museum, so we are owned by a trust, and this of course means that we are very dependent on the ticket sale and the income from that. So, as I said earlier, an important part of this, what I call our success story, has been that we have broadened our visitor groups. And on the next slide you will see an old picture from the older times of the museum. And through the decades, from 1954, when the museum opened, it was really a museum for people that had a special interest in maritime history. And the fact is that it was the wives, when they came to the museum with their husbands, they left their husbands at the museum door, and then the wives left and went to town shopping or doing some other things. So they didn't even want to come into the museum because they thought it was so boring. So that was really an active choice when the museum reopened in 2012, that we want to be a museum for everyone. We want still to be a museum for mariners, for those who have a special interest in maritime history, but we also want to be for families and those who don't, the wives who maybe don't have this special interest. And the fact is that many maritime museums in the world are labeled as boring, and many people think that they only contain ship models and navigation instruments and so on. So just the name Maritime Museum can be scary for some people, and they don't even want to come inside. So we really had to work hard to get off that label. And today the museum has a strong profile of being a museum where children of all ages feel welcome. And I hear a lot of families here on Åland who say that, oh, it's always so nice to go with the children to the Maritime Museum. That is something that the families nowadays know that they can do on a weekend. It's a program that they want to do with their children. Here is another type of picture of how we can present the museum nowadays, with some playfulness in it. So in my presentation, I want to share with you which values that led our work when we started to work against children and families, and what the outcome was. One key word that has been important to us is integration. And with that I mean that we have not separated in our museum the activities that suit children from the rest of the museum. So there's not like a separate children's part. We have these hands-on activities, as you can see on this slide. There are many of them in the museum, but they are part of the main exhibition, and the fact is that both children and adults like doing them. We also have this treasure hunt that the kids can do going through the whole exhibition, and that has also been a way for children can explore the museum at their own way, and then the adults follow and do their way, so they can do it at the same time, and that has been something really important. And we think the best thing in our world is when we see that a child and an adult is doing something together, that they are experiencing the exhibitions together. Yes. We also are very fortunate that many of our objects in the exhibition are very durable and they can be touched. This that you see on this slide, the big wheel is also, it's not a replica, it's a real wheel from an old sailing ship, and that is also typical for our collection, because the sailing ship area continued for a really long time here on Åland, and actually the last sailing ship fleet of the whole world was here on Åland. So that has meant that we have in our museum a lot of these artifacts that come from the sailing ships, and we don't need to build replicas, because we have the real things. And these objects were also made to last. They have been through storms all over the world, so they can take some messy children's hands who touch it for a while. It's okay. We also have our own mascot, which is a ship rat. It's called Ruby. She's a female, and she was invented in 2012 as well. And she has her own small mini exhibitions through the whole main exhibition. So that's all. These are also integrated into the main exhibition. So they have been really successful, are very good with smaller children, where we go and they can find them, and then there are some maritime theme that they show in this exhibition, and it's a good way to talk about the galley, the food on board, or safety at sea. As you can see, these two rats were trying to save themselves from the sinking ship. And they are also on a very low height, so it's actually much more easier for children to reach them than for adults. So the children just go down and lie on the floor and look at them, and the adults think it's a bit hard to go that low above the floor. But yeah. So that is one thing. Another thing that we really like to do as our museum is to encourage children to play. And of course that can't be integrated into the main exhibition, but we have a separate children's room as well, and their free play is a key word. So we don't like to tell them in advance what to do. That is in fact the thing with the hands-on activities. There you get a task and you perform that. But here we wanted to create a space where they can use their own imagination and be creative and come up with their own games. And so this Ruby and the Sea, it's underwater world. It's on 2 floors, so you go below the surface, where we have this wreck, a real fishing boat, and a mermaid's cave, and a lot of different sea animals and fishes. And then you can also climb up above the sea and do some. There's a research boat where you can do some marine research as well. We have an education program also attached to this playroom, that focuses on marine environment. So we have a short lesson on that topic, on environmental issues, and then the children get to play in the room, and then we also have a session of crafts where we use recycled material in a room next door where we have a small craft studio. Yes. Here next up is let's see if it works. It's a really short film that was made by, it's only 15 seconds, it was made by Visit Åland, the tourist company. Let's see if I can get it to work. No? Is it? No, it's not on. Now. So it was really short, but that was for social media, a Facebook campaign that the tourist, this tourist company had. Let's see. Okay. Sorry. I think the network is a bit slow, so sometimes it takes a while when I'm pressing something here, and I can see that it takes a while before it happens. So one important milestone on the road to becoming a popular museum for children was this a temporary exhibition that we had a few years ago, and it was called On a Voyage with the Chief and Sally Jones. That was it was the first time that we did a children's exhibition, and it's based on a children's book by a Swedish author that has a lot of maritime themes in it. It's about a gorilla that goes to sea, and we created this environment in the exhibition space that also encouraged children to play. So we had an education program attached to the exhibition where the school classes read the book, and then they came to the museum and we discussed different themes in it, and then they got time, about half an hour, to just be in the exhibition and play. And this was the first time when we really noticed how important that was. We got very good feedback from teachers who said that it was the first time that they saw some of the children play, that they hadn't seen them play in the schoolyard, and there were two 12-year-old kids also who still wanted to play here in this exhibition. So it was really rewarding, and we got a lot of families coming back. They had been here with their school class, and then they came back with their family and wanted to be in the exhibition and play again. So that was really one important milestone on the road that we started to get families to find our museum. This exhibition then went on tour. So it went to Gothenburg in Sweden first, and when I talked with the educators in Gothenburg, I also encouraged them to have in their education program time for the children to play. And they actually afterwards they thanked me and said that they hadn't thought of it themselves, that they could just let the children be in the exhibition and do what they wanted, but that it was a really good thing. So I think that sometimes we adults tend to forget how important play is, and that we maybe get scared that it's too noisy and messy and so on. But I think that if you just create the room and the space for it, and if you are prepared for it, I think it can work. Maybe you need some physical boundaries. Maybe you need a door that you can close, or maybe you can have these classes visiting when out of hours, when the museum is closed for the rest of the visitors. But I know that it's always we also have at our museum a bit of a struggle. When you want to be a museum for everyone, it's really annoying for some adults when there is a lot of noise at the museum. So that's something that we have to struggle with all the time. And I think maybe out there's someone who has some experience of this as well, and maybe have some advice. But sometimes it can. I think that still, if you have the room and space for it, then it can really work, and it's rewarding. The exhibition also went to Turku in Finland, to their maritime museum there, and that was also very nice because that museum still is a museum quite for mariners. They don't have that many families visiting them, but when they had this exhibition, they also started noticing how many families and children were visiting them and how their visitor numbers started to grow. And now they have built their own facilities for children as well. So I think it was a really good thing that they borrowed this exhibition and got to see with new eyes on this visitor group. So next I'm going to talk a bit about the ship Pommern and what we have done there. And let's see, here I also have a 15-second film made by Visit Åland. Just a moment. Yeah. When we planned the visitor experience on Pommern, integration was here also a given thing. We have here on the ship also hands-on activities on the twin deck that complement the activities that we have in the museum. And up on the weather deck, we have an audio track for adults where they eavesdrop on the crew. So the idea is that you are, as a visitor, you are part of Pommern's voyage to Australia and back, and you walk around and you get to hear what the crew is talking about in the different deck houses and so on. So it's not a regular audio guide with facts, it's more like radio theater. So we did it with actors and so on. We of course also wanted to do something for children. Up here on weather deck we have our mascot Ruby, the ship rat. She could also of course be on the ship. And first we had these great plans on an application for smartphones, a fun trail kids would follow when they walk around with their adults, and they could contain games and fun things like that. But then one day I started to think, wait a minute, what are we creating here now? We are creating something that make our visitors walk around with a phone in their hand, looking at the phone, when we want them to look at this fabulous ship, the surroundings that they have. So when we started to think about it, it seemed really stupid. And an application is also tremendously expensive, so it was a big relief to say that, oh, we are not going to do an application for a smartphone. So we had to rethink of what we would do, and suddenly it was so clear. Of course we would do an audio track for children as well. So we hired an author of children's books and gave her the assignment to write a screenplay of Ruby's voyage on Pommern. So she gave a tone to our mascot, Ruby the ship rat, and she made her into this fantastic, omnipotent character who believes that she is the one that is in charge on board. She is this small, but still, and she can make the ship go all the way to Australia and back, and the crew doesn't even know that she's there. And she also tells the children secrets about the life on board. Here you can see she has her own shirt hanging, drying there, and we have these natural small holes on the ship, but they're like just like a rat could fit in. It's from the galley. She likes to be in the where the cook is. Maybe get some food from there. So that's been really successful, and so when a family comes to the ship, they can choose. The adults can choose if they like to do the children's version or if they like to do the adult version. So it follows the same trail, and has the same length. So in a family you can do both. But sometimes it's of course really nice for adults as well to know what the children are listening to. So that's something that we did then. Then we had the lockdown in the spring. Our museum closed 18th of March, and we opened on the 1st of June again. So it was fortunately not that a long time, but we didn't really do so much digital material. Instead, we wanted to do something for the local community, something that the families could do together. And that's when we came up with an window exhibition. We are very fortunate to have a lot of windows in our museum, and we thought that if the visitors can't come into the museum, they can still walk around the building and look into the windows. So during the Easter holidays, we revealed what our ship rats, we have a lot of ship rats in our museum, what they are doing when the museum is closed. So they are practicing climbing the mast, and they were sewing sails, and they were hiding eggs, Easter eggs, in the library, and they even had a big party with all of the sea animals from the children's room. So a lot was happening, and in every window there was also a question attached to it, something for the kids to think about when they were looking at it. And it was, many families really liked it and came many times looking at these windows, because there wasn't that much to do in the spring. So this was a good activity. Here you can also see something that we had on social media, what our sea animals were forced to do when we were closed. So they had to wash themselves and be clean. Now we had the children's room closed for the whole summer, but on 1st of October last week we actually decided to open it to the public again. We don't have any corona here actually on Åland at the moment, so we thought that we can have it open now, and then we will close it if the situation changes. So when then discussing learning at museums, I want to highlight two things. And the first one is the impact I think that a museum visit can have on a child or any human being, of course. And this is something that I think all of us working at museums are very much aware of, but I think it's important to remind ourselves of it now and then. In fact, I believe that a single visit to a museum as a child can leave a stronger memory than all the things you learn in a classroom through your entire schooling. And I also believe that many of us have these strong memories of something that we have experienced in a museum as a child. My memory is a calf with two heads that I saw in a natural history museum. And this was here it was obviously the curiosity about the item that triggered my long-term memory, but also the fact that I saw a real calf. It was not a copy, it was the authentic animal, and it had two heads. And this authenticity of objects is the feather in the cap for museums. This is where we can compete with other things in society that's urged for our attention. In general, visitors nowadays, tourists are looking for authentic experiences when they are traveling. They look for something that is unique. And that is something that I think museums should really think about, how important and how much value there is in authentic experiences. The second thing I want to talk about regarding learning at museums is something that is called affective and tacit knowledge, quiet knowledge. And here I like to quote Aileen Hooper Greenhill, who is a professor of museum studies. This is a quote from her book, Museums and Educations. And she says that museum-based learning pulls together the past, present, and future. In order to interpret new experiences in the present, learners must use their existing learning skills and their existing knowledge. These are the tools that enable them to appropriate and make their own their museum experience. As they do so, they lay down experiences and tacit knowledge that may be called upon in the future. And she has also said that contemporary learning theory shows how facts and information only make sense to learners when they can be seen as part of a pattern that already has some familiarity and resonance. So these theories about the learning process and the experience a visitor can have in a museum is really of importance, and something that I bring into the work with the children. And I have two practical examples when I have acknowledged these facts. So the first one was when we sometimes have guided tours with really small children, like 2 to 3 years old. And at the first time when we had groups of children this age, I got really puzzled. I didn't really know what to talk about them, how to tell them about maritime history when they have so little experience in this age. But then we came to this space in our museum called the forecastle, like a cabin where the crew lived, where they slept and had their meals. And this is where I suddenly knew exactly what to tell these young children. So I told them basic things about eating and sleeping connected to this room, and how different that could be in former times. They got to feel the blankets, how different they felt, and the mattress, and compare it to how their own mattress feels at home. And this was I also told them that this was the space where the sailors had their meals, but there were no tables. So how did they manage to eat? Maybe they did it as when you are on a picnic, that you have your plate in your lap, and so on. And that's when I suddenly realized that I had reached out to these children and they understood what I was talking about. These subjects, eating and sleeping, were things that they had existing knowledge of and experience of, because that was something that they had done their whole life. So maybe a learning process started right there, and they will remember this place, this space, the forecastle as well. So that was really a moment when I realized that. And the second example was also quite from the beginning of my work here at the museum, when I walked around in the exhibition with about 6 to 7 year old children, and we were looking at all these beautiful models of sailing ships from older times, and I told them stories about the hard life at sea and so on. And they seemed quite interested in these stories. But then we came to a different section, more modern section in the museum, where we have these passenger ferries. And suddenly they became super enthusiastic and were shouting, "Oh, Viking Line, wow, that's so cool." And I was like, "Oh, really? Yeah, that's just a modern ferry. That's really interesting." I thought the sailing ships were more interesting. But then I, of course, realized that these children have their own experience and memories of these passenger ferries, because growing up here on Åland, most families travel on a ferry sometimes. That's the way you go away when you want to go to Sweden, to Stockholm, for example, to do some shopping or sightseeing, or you go visiting relatives in Finland or in Sweden. You go by a ferry, and for many it's connected with something fun. They have these playrooms on these ferries, and a lot of programs for children and so on. So that was also something that the children really liked this, and of course they can connect it to something that they know about. And this is of course something that applies to all kinds of visitors. This about having this tacit knowledge. It's not only for children, but also when you come from a different culture, for example, and you can find something that you can connect with in the museum. Yes. One other thing I like to talk about that we have worked a bit with is something we call the Pixar Method. And many of you are probably familiar with this big movie company, Pixar, that has produced animations for children like Finding Nemo and Toy Story and so on. And these films have been really successful. And they are so successful because they are liked by both children and adults. And this is where the secret of these films lies, that they have created something that addresses both groups, both children and adults. So what Pixar does is that they create these funny characters and exciting adventures that children like, but at the same time the dialogue and the script is actually made for adults. So there are a lot of references in these films to things that adults recognize. It can be the stereotype of a character like the turtle in Finding Nemo, that's a life-enjoying hippie that seems a bit high and that uses words like Jude. And for children it's only a funny character, but as an adult who has experience of different kinds of people know the type and can relate to that and think it's funny. And this was something that this method we also used a bit when we had the children's exhibition that I told you about earlier, On a Voyage with the Chief and Sally Jones. It was of course an exhibition for children, but we wanted adults to enjoy it as well. So there are texts in the exhibition as well, and these were written for adults, where we talk about maritime themes like trade routes and work on board and harbor life and smuggling and so on. So there was also something for adults to do while the children were playing around. They could walk around and learn from these texts. And in the setting of the exhibition, we also placed out some small references to the adult world that the child wouldn't understand. Like here you have this bar in the Docklands, a nasty bar called Gorilla Bar. Above the bar there was a window where we placed a red curtain and a lamp, which for an adult can think what that maybe means, but for a child it's just a window. So then I also want to highlight that if you want to be a kid-friendly museum, it's important that this goal imbues the whole organization. And that is everything from how the front of house greet the visitors to your physical facilities, that you have a nursing table on the toilet, that you have spaces for breastfeeding and spaces where children can have a snack, and how you also address different visitor groups in your marketing material on the website and so on, that you show children on this in these pictures. And maybe you can think that isn't that bad if there's a little noise now and then in the museum. Children are loud, and maybe you should sometimes just listen to what they have to say. And I have here copied some quotes from a page called Kids in Museums, an British organization. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They have this manifesto that you can sign if you want to be a kid-friendly museum. And here is some good advice. And also, I think it is very good to think about that maybe it's sometimes the grown-ups who need help, because they don't know how to be in a museum, and they don't know how to talk about art, for example, and so they maybe need some support. At our museum, we have also made a separate brochure for children. So we have this regular brochure and then also a separate that's the Children's Maritime Museum. So that's one thing that we have done in making in this marketing material. And of course, on our website, we also display a lot of pictures of children. And when you think about your front of house staff, it's also, of course, important that they are like children, that they like having them as guests, that they are people who are fond of them. And another good thing that I read about is also good to sometimes change your point of perspective and challenge yourself, because you can challenge yourself and visit a place that you have never visited before. Maybe it's a sports gym or a book club or something else. And when you do that, you may feel insecure and confused. And that's how many people feel when they visit a museum. So that's a perspective that you can bear in mind also when you plan the reception and the signs and how you welcome your visitors to the museum and so on. And I think that if you have, as a child, visited museums frequently, you will do it as an adult yourself, and you will bring your own children to the museum. And you will know how to behave, and you will feel secure. So one thing we also do with young children is to teach them how to be at the museum and how the museum is constructed. So what it means if there is a rope in front of a sofa or a chair, that is a boundary that the museum has made up, and means that so that you know that you can't go and sit on the sofa and what it means and so on. And how do you read the labels? What's the number that's next to an object? Oh, that's the number that points to that text where you can read about the object and learn more about it. And this was actually the kids who made me aware of this, because they started to ask, well, what's that number? What's that? What's that? And oh, of course, it's not obvious that you know what that means. So I think if you learn that as a child, you will also feel secure when you are an adult, and you will continue visiting museums. So with our work with children and families and with different visitor groups, we have along the way paid attention to availability and inclusiveness. And this is something that we also, for this we received the Save the Children Award in 2017. So here in this picture there is a lift that we have in our children's room, because otherwise you have to climb up these ladders to go up to the next level, to above the sea. But we also installed and invested in a lift so that everyone can move between the floors. And yeah. Okay, I see that the time is maybe running up. Yeah, I'll go back to that. I wanted just to say a few words about what we do, our education programs. We have local schools and kindergartens visiting us through the year, and we get funding from 2 local companies here, so we can allow them to have a free entry to the museum. And then we offer them different programs that they can choose from. every time we do a new exhibition, we also have an educational program that connected to it. And we offer some workshops as well. So we have for younger children where they can explore a seaman's chest, and actually in this workshop we let them touch authentic historical objects together with the educator. They can also do a time travel where we play our way through the exhibition. This picture was actually from that, where they get to sign up on a voyage around, somewhere on a fantasy ship, and here they have signed with their names, and every child got its own occupation on board. So we have a captain and a cook and so on. It's always hard to come up with ideas that get teenagers involved and interested in the museum. I think this is something that many of you also can recognize. But I'd like to share with you one idea that has worked out quite well for us, and that's called the photo challenge. So the teenagers get divided into different groups and get to look at photographs from our archive. These are pictures where there are sailors doing different things on board. And the task for the group is then to analyze the photograph. What are the sailors doing? What feelings can you read from it? And can you see any power structures in it? And then the groups can move around freely in the exhibition and use their own smartphone to recreate the situation in the old photograph. So here is an example of where they have done that. And this is a really good opportunity to also talk about how we handle photographs today. Children growing up today are really surrounded by pictures all the time, and they take themselves by their phones. Can we imagine that our photographs will live on when we are not here anymore, as they did in these former times? And what will happen to our photographs? So there's a lot to discuss on that subject as well, and it has been a fun thing to do for older children. So then I would like to end with this picture, which I think really well describes to us what children can teach us. When we are in this exhibition, we can look at the beautiful lighthouse that we have that is in the background. But we can also choose to explore new things beyond the object and maybe even find the rainbow, as these girls did. So it's only the imagination that sets the boundaries. Yes, thank you for your attention. If you have any questions or comments, I think Johanna will moderate that. I can't hear you.
Okay, I think I'm live now.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted and had trouble unmuting.
Oh.
Okay, I'm up, I think. Can you hear me? There's an extra sound.
It's very bad.
Yeah, it's annoying. Well, I'd like to thank you, Heidi. It was a really inspiring talk you gave, so concise and thorough, and it's like a guideline anyone could follow, you know, to
that's good. I hope
follow in your success story at the museum. It's really nice, and the examples you took are really eye-opening.
Yeah.
And the points you make.
Yeah,
we do have a few questions coming in.
Yeah.
We are curious here in the committee as to how the project group you mentioned in the beginning that led the work, who were in it?
Okay, so we had a project group here.
Now you're on. Yeah.
Okay, now, yeah.
Yeah.
So we had our own project group here at the museum from our museum staff. And we really, when we do things, we really like to lead it. And we had also architects coming from the outside who designed the exhibitions and so on, but we were really involved in the content. And it was the same thing with Pommern. We who are in these groups are really feel it with our hearts, so we want we can't just let it to someone from the outside. So it was the museum staff with some advisory persons also, especially at the museum who have this deeper maritime insight when we had to ask about these things. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read a question from the Q&A. Here's one about when you plan a new exhibition, do you plan the education program at the same time, or do you have to fit the education program to the exhibition the curators set up? But I think I know what you're going to answer.
Yeah, well, since we are such a small staff, like me, I'm the one doing both the exhibition and the education program. So it's quite easy to be involved in both. Then there can be problems with having time and resources to do everything at the same time, but we always bear in mind the educational part when we do an exhibition. So yeah, we don't do it separately.
No. What does your museum do to evaluate the affective and tacit knowledge in your programs?
How we evaluate it?
Yeah, do you evaluate your programs
afterwards?
Bearing those things in mind, the tacit knowledge.
Mm. Well, not when we plan them, we do, but we don't. We are not that good at after a project or do this evaluation afterwards. That's something that we could absolutely do better, but it's always the struggle with having time for everything. So, but indeed, when we are planning them,
okay,
we think about that.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question about how you communicate with the schools in your community. Or do you also have school groups from Finland or Sweden? And how do you sort of advertise? How do you reach out to them?
Yeah, well, we have both school groups from Åland, the local school groups, and these are the ones that we offer free entry, and that we always try to have an educator who have them. But then we also have school groups from not so many from Sweden, but from Finland. They come on this holiday with their school classes in the spring and in May and in September. unfortunately, we haven't had resources to offer an educational program for them yet, but that is my personal dream that we could do in the future. But there's always the language boundary, because these groups mostly are Finnish. And as I said, we are Swedish speaking here, but we have now hired guides who also have who speak fluently Finnish. So I want to, when we get rid of this Corona thing, I want to educate them so that they can also have educational programs for groups coming from Finland. But then the other part of the question, how we reach out to these schools here on Åland, we just email them in every year, in the spring, and also in the winter, and now in the autumn when the school starts after the holidays. But I can say that it has been also during my whole career, this is something that I work really hard to get the schools to come and visit, because usually it's hard for them also to find time for it. One year I went around to the schools and visited them when they had meetings for the teachers, and gave a presentation of our museum and what they can do here. And that was a really good thing to do, but I haven't done it every year. But it's also something that at least the principals here on Åland, they liked having a visitor coming to their meetings.
Here's a question about events on weekends. Do you do them for children then and families? Do you have events on weekends?
We sometimes have, but not that many. But we have every year this annual event called Family Day. It's the 6th of December, when it's the Finnish it's the Independence Day. So it's a holiday. And that's the only day through the whole year when we have free entry to the museum. So then we have a special program for children, and it differs from year to year. But we have noticed that when we try to have these events on the weekends, there's not always that many that are coming. They like to come just when they want to. But during school holidays, we have next week, for example, is the autumn holiday. And then we always arrange some extra program during the Easter and so on.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question. It's about how the museum for the first decades attracted men.
Yeah.
Interested in sea voyages and seafaring, and how the women and children went somewhere else while they were viewing the exhibits. But now it has turned around with this development you've described.
Yeah.
But how does that hit those men now?
Well, as I said in the beginning, we don't want to forget about the men. They are still really important to us. So when we redid the exhibition, we really tried to find a tone of voice that also gives something to those who have a special interest in maritime history. So I think that I don't believe that they feel neglected. They can still visit, and I think they might even like it that they get their wives coming along with them. So we have visitors that come all the way from Australia, even just to visit our museum and Pommern, because they have a special connection. They were sailors who ran away when they came to Australia and wanted a new life over there. So these families, they have relatives, their relative came from Åland. So we have this really special connection with Australia. So yeah, there are, what with that I mean that there are many people who they have this special interest, and they find our museum that way.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Here's another question. It's about why the Pommern is open from May until September only.
Yeah, well, that's because it's so cold. We don't have any heating on board. And it also gets, if we get snow or ice up on deck, it gets really slippery. So we can't protect our visitors enough. So you never know, as you know, the climate. At least here now we have a really warm autumn. It's like 15 degrees Celsius outside, but it could be -degrees in October. You never know. It differs from year to year. So that's just a principal decision to have her open only from May to September. And it's also very good for the staff on board to have time to take out all their tools and because the work continues on the ship throughout the year. There's always work being, because that's the case with old ships. You have to work on them all the time.
Yeah. The exhibition you talked about in the presentation, the children's exhibition, that sort of was a milestone on your on your development. Was that in a special space inside the museum, or? Yeah,
we have this space for temporary exhibitions. It's quite a small space. It's about 100 square meters, but that was where we built that up. And now we have another. We change exhibitions there about once a year, so we have another one there now.
Just to orient myself, basically, when was that exhibition put up?
It was in 2013, 7 years ago. Well, we had it for 2 years. And if you like to see it, you can go to Oslo, because it went from Turku, it went to Oslo, and they liked it so much, so they bought it from us. So they have it there at the Maritime Museum.
Here's a question about hún er náttúrulega orðin meira en eitt. En ég heyrist ekki yfir. Heidi.
Yeah.
The live event shut itself down. So I guess we're just here on our own.
Oh,
but
so
it is
after an hour it shut itself down.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe that's. I don't know. Peter is looking into it. It would be nice to say goodbye to our listeners.
Yeah.
Já, bara tvær. Já. Ok, getur það bara sett í chatið? Setur það bara í chatið? Nei, það er farið. Okay. Og nú kemur aftur live rammi. Peter is looking into it. There's a live frame on me now.
Yeah.
I guess we have to just. Yeah, it seems Teams live event just ended. So we're done here.
Okay.
But I will try and reach out to our audience on Facebook.
Yeah.